my session. I know that most of you seem to be PMs because I know a lot of you, so welcome. I'm going to be talking about our agency's move to Scrum, but as part of this I wanted to kind of kick it off in a not how to do things kind of way. I wanted to kick it off by actually talking about this new concept that I've been dabbling in called being human. There's a lot of new sessions on this, the whole Brene Brown movement, and just kind of sharing from my perspective why I wanted to share something that's kind of uncomfortable, and also to talk about things that I think most agencies wouldn't be super psyched to be like, hey, we did this wrong, so let's talk about it out loud. So just kind of being okay with saying, like, yeah, the things that I'm going to tell you are not our proudest to talk about, but it's important to talk about them because we were able to look at that and say, hey, let's change the things that aren't working and make better things. So what I'm hoping is that out of this, you can leave feeling like you learned something new or you thought of something in a new way, and you can take this back to your teams and use that to start discussions with them. So hopefully that's your takeaways after this. Cool. So first of all, I want to start, raise your hands. Who here knows what Scrum is? Perfect. All right. Who here does Scrum or some flavor of Scrum? Cool. So this may or may not be for you, but what this is not going to be is it's not going to be how to do Scrum. So if you came to this session hoping to learn how to do it, sorry, but hopefully you can pick up some contextual things that maybe you can take back anyway. So just to kind of set that thing, it's more going to be a story, not a how-to. What this is going to be is we're going to talk about what we at Amazee Labs do, what we've learned, and how it's worked for our teams. And for those of you who are lateral in thinking, I'm going to go a little bit back and forth for some of the things that we talk about. So if I don't go into depth in certain areas, just kind of earmark that. We're probably going to come back to it later. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Stephanie. I'm a project manager at Amazee Labs out of the Austin, Texas office. I've been with Amazee Labs for almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in February. This is my first job as a project manager. Before I was a project manager with Amazee Labs, I was an event manager with the Drupal Association. So kind of the same thing, but definitely a waterfall approach. We had deadlines that we had to hit, and if we did not hit them, things did not happen. So there was not a lot of flexibility, and it was just kind of a transition to kind of learn a new work style by moving to an agency where we were doing not specifically waterfall. So first, what I want to do is go ahead and introduce my company. So I work with Amazee Labs, which is founded out of Zurich, Switzerland. But we also have offices in Austin, Texas, and Cape Town, South Africa. It's super cool to work with an international agency. Everyone kind of does their own thing, which is to be expected when you're working with different nationalities, different customs, different work styles, all that good stuff. It's a little bit less ideal, though, when everyone kind of also has a different work process. So we're all kind of one big family. Theoretically, we should be able to share things, but there are some things that all the different offices do that kind of make this a challenge. So at our mothership in Zurich, they use mostly waterfall approach. So their project managers would kind of set the pace for everything, set the deadlines, work with the clients to figure out what needed to get done, and then the team would implement them as the tickets got assigned. With the Austin office, we were trying to do Scrum. We heard Scrum was a cool thing, and we got some books. We read them. We had a regular-sized book and a mini little companion book, and we read them, and we kind of thought we got it, so we're going to dig into that next. And then we also had our Cape Town office, which also was kind of Scrum, but also not. And we'll dig into that. So one of the problems with all of us doing different things differently is it was kind of hard to pass tickets. So like if Zurich had a project and we had capacity, we would run into trouble where there was no clean handoff. And we also had different work styles, and so with the Austin office, for example, one of the team members would get a ticket and they would implement it from start to finish. So site building, theming, testing, all the delivery kind of in one piece. And Zurich would do, one person who was a themer would get the ticket, one person who was a site builder would get a ticket, and then the project manager would do testing. So it was a little bit broken up, and so those kind of differences kind of made it difficult to have a nice flow between the teams. The other issues that we ran into were with specification. So all of the offices had kind of the same problems. And so this was a challenge for a variety of reasons. So the way that we would kick off projects and run projects was the project manager would work with the client, they would come up with the things that need to get done, and then the tech lead would digest all those things, and then they would kick out tickets. And so the team who was implementing them would just receive tickets with the names on them and say, hey, go do this ticket, okay, bye, good luck. And there were some problems with that because people would get a ticket and they don't really have a big picture of what it is that they're implementing, and so there's a lot of room for error and misinterpretation and different kind of expectations along with that. So that was one struggle. Another problem with this kind of one person in charge of things is that if that person went on vacation, things broke, things died, people weren't able to get clarification on tickets, they weren't able to get new tickets into the system, and so there was just a little bit of disruption while that person was gone. And so if someone did leave for a vacation, they had a lot of guilt because they knew that them leaving was going to cause problems. In addition, the team didn't know kind of big picture, and so if a client or someone else came up to them and said, hey, can you talk to me more about this project? They would be able to say, yeah, I specifically did this one thing, you have to go talk to so-and-so, and it might become a chain of go talk to this person, go talk to this person, and it's very inefficient to have that kind of information not be shared. Another issue was onboarding really sucked. So if we wanted to pass a project from Zurich to Austin or Austin to Zurich, the amount of time it would take to actually explain what the project was and how the things worked and all that kind of stuff, plus just actually getting the dev installed, it would take like a day, maybe two, and that's expensive, and we don't have time for that. And typically when we're passing tickets, it's because there's a time crunch anyway, so that was also something that was kind of a pain. Another thing that we ran into with the Austin office specifically was when we estimated tickets, because remember we were doing this kind of partial Scrum, we were using hours because hours felt comfortable. And it was really difficult because we didn't really have a baseline for those hours, and it was mostly just on guesses and expectations of what the individual person could do. And it just made it difficult because it was on those few people on the team who were developers to come up with those numbers and to be right. And so that's a lot of pressure on someone who wants to do good. So they're assuming the best of all ideal situations is going to be true when it comes to actually implementing it. But as you know, when you estimate in hours, you tend to not hit that hour mark a lot. And so that makes the developer feel bad, it makes the project manager feel like they're kind of letting the client down, and it makes the client sad because they're paying more than they were expected to pay. Another problem with that is that we were not really able to learn from this process, so it just sort of felt like every time we went into this estimation process, we were doing it from scratch and trying to do better, but when you have different pieces of tickets that have similar functionality, they're just not always comparable one-to-one, because implementing a menu on a really big site is going to be a different effort than implementing a menu on a smaller site. So it just was not very efficient, and definitely was something that we could have worked on. So if you do Scrum, you probably know the sprint and start and end cycle. So get used to this chart. We're going to see it a couple more times during the presentation. But when you have a sprint, you have a sprint start and you have a sprint end. And one of the biggest things that we ran into was Scrum was not really made for agencies. And so this is how we interpreted a start and an end. We had multiple clients, as agencies tend to do, and the clients had different days that we met with them, and so what ended up happening is we had one client start on Monday, one client start on Tuesday, one client start on Thursday, and what would happen is, yeah, we were doing 2-week sprints for that client like Scrum told us to, but what it was doing was actually creating a bunch of tiny sprints, and so there was no start, there was no stop, it was just constant delivery and chaos. And it was really difficult because depending on where we were in the week, like Monday client would get promised, yeah, we can totally deliver X, X, and Y. And by the time you get to Thursday and Friday, you know that you're already busy having to deliver something by Monday, and that person, that client that you're seeing, is going to get something really small or a really odd version of that to make sure that you can get it fit in the time so that all the clients that you promised previously get the thing that they were promised. So that was not the greatest. It was also difficult as well because there was no clear priority. So the team didn't know if they had 5 tickets in a sprint, in one of these sprints, which one to take on, because they all started and stopped and they all had their own boards. And so that just was not the best. Not huge fans. The team was stressed out because they always wanted to deliver really good stuff. The clients all felt like they were being ignored or could have been given more love because we were constantly being like, yeah, please hold, we'll get to this, it's fine, whatever. And so it was really difficult to actually sell the team and the clients on why Scrum was good because we weren't really seeing it. It felt like we were constantly putting out fires, and we knew that there had to be a better way of doing things because people keep talking about Scrum and they're positive about it, so there obviously had to be something that changed. And so here's what we did about it. By the way, if you're a PM, you're probably starting to stress out right now because all of the things that I've just told you are triggering memories maybe. So the good news is that you're not going to see bad things anymore. So what we did is we brought in a professional. We brought in a Scrum professional to the Zurich office. We knew that it was going to be a big change that we were going to implement company-wide, and so we wanted to make sure that we didn't just change all the things and say, here team, things are changed, be happy with it. Instead what we wanted to do is see if this actually would work, if we implemented it the way you were supposed to. And so we actually started off in the Zurich office, and we went to one client who was particularly favorable towards new things, and they had a lot of money, and they were like, we're not in time crunch, we want to see what happens with this newfangled Scrum thing. So one of the Zurich the Zurich office put together a dedicated Scrum team, which is something that they did not have previously. They just had anyone who they could get on a project, working on a project, so lots of different people working on lots of different projects and not consistently on that project. And now they had a dedicated group of people who were going to work on that specific project. The good news is that it worked. So taking this new information about this Scrum that could do miracle things, Michael, who is our CTO, went on the road and became our own internal Scrum missionary. So he went to Cape Town, he went to Austin, and he stayed in Zurich and made sure that all the teams were picking up this new process properly. And one of the things that was really important to do as part of that is to split up the teams. So Zurich has a really big dev team, and so they split it into 2. So right now, we actually have 4 dedicated Scrum teams, but 3 offices. It's a little bit confusing, but it's actually working really well for them. Everyone seems to be happy. So, yeah. So when Michael came to us, keep in mind that we thought that we knew what Scrum was, and we were a little bit like, why are you coming to us? We get it. If you're just going to basically teach us things that we already know. So the biggest challenge for us was learning what we knew. And actually learning how to do it properly and how to do it in a way that could work for agencies. So what changed? We were all very happy and hopeful that this new thing that was being presented to the team was not going to kill us. It was actually going to work and that clients would be happy. So this is why we all kind of went in a little bit hesitant, but ultimately it has to be better than the thing we were doing originally. And here's some of the big things that we changed. So we restructured the meetings, we involved the team, we got a Scrum Master, we learned what story points were, and we started having the team test. So this is great, but all of these things are internal, and with Scrum, it does take 2 to tango. So the next step was going to our clients and saying, we did a thing, and here's what we did. So before we kicked it off on a really big scale, we went to all of our clients and we said, hey, we did this, we learned this new Scrum thing. We're going to walk you through what this Scrum thing is going to look like and how it's going to work. We're going to try it, and we want to hear from you, like, if this makes you sad or happy while we're doing this, so that we can tweak because we're learning. And it goes back to that whole being human thing. We didn't want to just spring it on them and say, our way or the highway. We wanted to be like, we want you to be part of this. And the more you're into it and the more feedback you can give us, the better we're going to become and the happier everyone will eventually be. So instead of just hammering it down their throats as part of like, you're going to learn this, we instead said, here's kind of the simple cadence that we're going to pick up, which is we're going to meet, we're going to talk about the things you want to do, we're going to prioritize them, and then we're going to demo this. And as part of this whole process, like, you'll just pick it up as we go. So it was a lot for people, especially who are not in technology, to kind of know this new process exists and they have to pay attention to it. But surprisingly, by the time that we hit the second meeting, they kind of started to figure it out, and now all of them get it. They're not necessarily the best or the most involved at it, but the level of involvement they all have is a comfort level that they can kind of maintain, and that works for us. So it was good that they were positive about the transition. So going back to what a sprint board or a sprint week should look like, there was a start, there was an end. Again, all of these clients were cool with us changing the new process, and so they were all also okay with us moving their meetings. And so what we were able to do is move all of our meetings with clients onto the same day, and all of the demos onto the same day, which was pretty big. The other thing that was really cool about us all getting onto this sprint cycle was that now all 4 of our dedicated sprint Scrum teams are all in sync. So if Zurich has a project that's coming up due, we know that we'll be able to get them the completed ticket to demo to their client within a day or so of their actual client demo. And that's really nice to not have too huge of a discrepancy on their start and stop, so that you can continue to have that synced full company team rhythm. So this is kind of what our sprint week looks like. I'll just go through it really quickly because a lot of these things, if you're doing Scrum, should be familiar. But here's kind of how we stack them, because it might not line up one-to-one with what the book says. So we actually kick off our sprints on Wednesday, so this is why this is stacked, starting in the middle. You have to go a little bit backwards because you want the demos to kind of line up with how this goes. So we have a sprint estimation in the morning on Wednesday, and then we do sprint planning. So sprint estimation before sprint planning gives us a chance to bump in those last-minute client tickets because things change. And it also helps us have time to get everything all queued before we start. So typically, we'll actually start our sprint at lunch or right after lunch. So the team has time to kind of digest what we just decided that we were going to work on. And then Thursday, Friday, Monday, we do daily stand-up. And then our Tuesdays are like client days. And so backlog grooming, something I want to talk about. Not all of our clients actually have a big enough project to justify meeting weekly to talk about backlog grooming and going through the tickets and adding new things for us to work on. So we don't always meet every week. Typically, we meet once every 2 weeks as part of the client demo rhythm. And then, so every Wednesday is estimation. So if we meet with a client that day where backlog grooming is indicated, we'll actually do estimation the following day. And if we don't meet with a client to do backlog grooming, we still will do estimation because there's typically more tickets in the backlog for us to go through. And then another thing that we do is we do a sprint board review on Thursday. This is the Thursday prior to client demos, and this is just our way of saying, hey, let's look at the board. Is anything on fire? Anything major needing to get done? Anything we don't think is going to get done by the time that we meet with the client on Tuesday, so that we can go to the client early and say, hey, there's a couple days notice. Likely this isn't going to get done. Is that a problem? And using that kind of feedback is really good, because then they can say, yeah, it's not really a problem, it's fine, we'll get it in the next sprint, or they'll say, no, we need to get it in. So time to reprioritize some of the tickets on the board and light some fires. And then we have sprint retrospective on the end of the sprint, which is where the team comes together. This is prior to client demos. The team comes together, we go through the board, we see all the things that are done and to do, whatever. We talk through all those tickets so that everyone who's on the team knows what's going on. And another thing that we do there is we assign all the tickets that are demoable to a developer who will demo them, or to me, because sometimes it's something that I can demo, which is great. And then we have the whole afternoon filled with client demos, and by the time that's over, we all want to drink. So before I mentioned that we restructured the meetings, and here's one of the big things that we changed. So previously, the PM and the tech lead, or maybe just the PM, would go to meetings, and then the PM would basically have to come down the mountain and say, here's what the client said. And then one of the reasons that was a problem is because there's things that can be misinterpreted. I'm not technical, so when I hear something that's being relayed from a client, I might put it through my filter, and when it comes out, it might not be one-to-one with what the client actually wanted. Other things is that I might remember things differently than the client said, or was recording something differently, or I just didn't know what questions to ask for further clarification when the client said that they wanted a thing. So it just kind of created this clogging of information. It just was not great. So what we did is that on Tuesdays, the entire team attends the meetings. And I did put an asterisk here because sometimes the entire team does not attend the meetings, but we kind of play that by ear. Every person has the calendar invites, and during retrospective, we'll actually go through and say, hey, you're coming to this meeting, yeah, you're coming to this meeting. Because sometimes there's just not new information, new work being requested for those meetings, and so it's just unnecessary to have everybody in, but there's fortunately, we're in an open office, maybe unfortunately, so that if someone needed to get pulled into one of those calls, it would be really easy to just have them take out their headphone and be able to listen. So yeah, one of the other things that's good about this is that we lose that whole game of telephone. The client is allowed to talk to the developers directly. The developers are allowed to ask clarifying questions. As part of the demo, they're now having to build a rapport with the client, and so the client sees what's being done and who did it, and they start to learn the different demo styles and teaching styles that the team has, and it just sort of makes everyone feel like they're all part of the same team and not just this client who gets delivered to, which is really nice. Another thing that we learned was story points, and it was really, really hard for us to actually figure out how to do story points because it was such an abstract thing. And so we started by estimating ANAs. And so this is one of my coworkers. What this is a screenshot from our Amazee Labs website on the team page. And basically we said, all right, let's set this line in the stand as a baseline. How many story points do you think it's gonna cost to create this page? And we decided that for us it would be 8. And using that, we could kind of feel our way through different levels of story point estimations. And so we would look at a ticket and say, okay, this ticket that we're looking at, maybe we want to change the logo blue. Is that going to be more or less of an effort than building Anna? And so we used that, and it was really funny because Anna would be mortified if she saw this. But she just became this thing that we used that actually really helped us get in sync of how long it took to do things on an otherwise super abstract method. So it did take us forever to actually get in sync. We all kind of, yes, agreed that such and such was bigger, less, whatever, but our estimation meetings were stupid long for like the first 2 months. Because we had to learn to talk things out. We had to learn to ask questions. We had to learn to update tickets because tickets maybe the description wasn't super clear. And so we had to learn to say, okay, well, if this description isn't super clear, we cannot estimate it until now we all agree on what it says. And so we would stop during the estimation, update the ticket, refresh the page, look at the ticket again and say, yes, we all agree on this, and now we're going to estimate based on this clarifying information. So it was a really nice way of us all learning. And now when we go through the estimation process of planning poker, we get to say Yahtzee when we all get the same number more often than not.
And when you went through that process, did you guys have a facilitator in that meeting that was going to shepherd that?
Yeah.
And was that the Scrum Master, or was it a technical architect?
It was Michael. So Michael was actually
That makes
there.
perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah, it was someone who wasn't part of the team, who didn't really have like skin in the game for what the result of it was, and it was more him getting us to talk.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And to clarify for everybody else, he's technical.
He is technical, but he was playing non-technical for this, so he wasn't asking clarifying questions. It was only the team.
Right, and the reason why I asked that is because I've had to play that type of role to facilitate it, and while I do that, I have this mashup of a technical architect hat, a business analyst hat, and a team manager hat, and a Scrum Master at the same time.
Yep.
And that's why I was like, okay, how did you guys do it? So if you stuck Schnitzel in, then, oh, he's probably doing that thing, but it's not just the Scrum Master that helps that until the team gets ready to do that.
So it's good that you asked that, because we actually ran into situations where the ticket was so complex that we tried to get into actually explaining the build of the ticket. And what we decided is that that's not what estimation's for, and so we'll flag that ticket as it needs to be talked about, and we'll take it out of the sprint planning, and we'll actually set up a separate meeting for that. And then we'll get into the technical grossness.
Oh, perfect, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have a limit on the story points? If it's larger than X, if this is more than 20 points, then
Yeah, there was a couple things. There was a couple things that we changed. So in story points, it goes like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. We got rid of 2 because 2 we just could not. We couldn't. So we just got rid of it, and so that's not in the thing. 13 is what we would use as our max for being able to start working on this ticket. 21 and above, we basically just say no, that needs to be cut down immediately. And so it doesn't actually get estimated beyond. Don't touch it. Yeah. Cool. So the next thing that we got really good at is story point delivery. So once we were kind of agreed on what it was going to take for us to deliver certain things, we started pulling those sprint reports, which were actually helpful once we learned how to actually interpret them. And we have this calculation that our Scrum Master actually implements that says, okay, during sprint 17, 18, and 19, we were able to pull in 120-ish to 140-ish tickets, story points. And during this next one, how many do we think we can get? And of course, we were always trying to get more than what we did the previous sprint, but we're not. The goal for us is not to ever match or beat that number. It's to match or beat the number that we put for us. So it's going to be a little bit complicated. So what we do is we pull the sprint report, figure out how many story points that we delivered, and then we do a calculation for the individual team members of how many days that they think that they're actually going to be working, and this allows us to build in vacations. So like when we left for Bad Camp, 4 of my 5 team members are at Bad Camp, and they were preparing for sessions. And so basically this entire sprint, we went in going, okay, huge chunk of availability gone, now we're going to readjust, and so the delivery that we're going to be doing this week is maybe half of what we normally do, but we all know that going in, and so no one's surprised, the clients all know, and hopefully when we deliver, like, no one is stressed out trying to deliver the thing that we promised.
Yeah, and it ties, I just want to, you had a wonderful place when you had your sprint start and end on a Wednesday, because all holidays fall on Mondays and Fridays, and so you can take that kind of Bad Camp availability planning and it doesn't disrupt your schedule. So 8 thumbs up. Thanks.
Cool. So the second part of this is that we became better at telling clients what they were going to get when the sprint started, and so they became happier because it felt to them like they were getting a custom promise of we're doing this for you, and then delivering on that promise, and so that made them feel a lot happier and a lot more cared for. So to go back to backlog grooming, along with everyone attending meetings and having a say in things, we've also changed it so that it's not just me creating tickets. Now everybody creates tickets. And again, PMs, the hair might go up on the back of your neck when you're like, oh my God, get out of my tickets. But it actually has worked out really well because there's a lot of things that get bubbled up from the developers as they're going through building stuff that I would never think to add. And so instead of them just adding it as part of the thing that they're doing, it gets more visibility and gets made as an actual ticket, and we all estimate it, and it goes through the process. The other things that we started adding is acceptance criteria and definition of done. Acceptance criteria makes it so that when we deliver a ticket, we all know what we're testing for, and definition of done indicates what actually needs to be done once that's done. So things like if the project is still being developed and it hasn't been deployed yet, definition of done can mean that it needs to be demoed to the client. If it's a maintenance project where we're adding maybe a new feature, the definition of done might be that it has to be maybe demoed to the client, but most likely the client will just get to test it and then include the deployment instructions and either make a new ticket for the deployment or deploy it as part of the sprint. So those little details will kind of change from ticket to ticket. Another thing that we all do now, which is super great, is we split tickets. So that whole idea of the more complexity that we add to a ticket, the more weird things that get bubbled up. We now just Solomon all the things, and we split the tickets and have a lot easier time of saying, okay, is this being split because it's something that we want to do and we just don't have time, or it's something that needs to be done, and so putting it into 2 different tickets will make it easier to be fast-tracked. It just kind of helps us learn what's critical versus what's maybe something that can wait. Another thing is making new tickets. clients can make new tickets, team can make new tickets, but it's just that opening thing of everyone has access to the board now. And then the other thing is that everyone's learning the importance of priority. So it's not just me, it's not just the Scrum Master, it's not just the clients. Like, we start to do priority as part of the whole conversation. So is this nice to have? Is it critical? Do we just want it because we're developers and we know that the thing is kind of weird, or is the client actually going to know this? So things like that. It's not just one person making that call.
I think that the idea of everybody else making tickets helps with that prioritization discussion, because I know that there's some members on my team who are like adding their little pet projects to their items, and it bubbles that stuff up to the surface, and you can have a discussion about priority client.
Yeah.
So that you can get done.
We've actually started this this epic label where it's called Polishing Party, where things that we as people who work with websites all the time see, but no one else will probably see. We start to make that label on certain things so that when we're going through the backlog, we can easily say, like, this is probably something we should focus on or not. And just really quickly, what we started doing as part of like a big deployment, a big website launch, is actually like dedicating a polishing party day where we give the developers that chance to say, here's the thing that really bugged you, here's 8 hours, go. And then the team gets to prioritize, figure out what things really drive them crazy, and then implement those changes so that we don't really have to say, hey client, can you just make room in your budget for this because it's bugging us? And that way it's very clean. Like, we're doing this for you, client, because you matter to us and the website matters to us, and we want it to look as like polished as possible. And for the developers, like, they get that chance to take those pet things and resolve them.
Yeah, and what's been really helpful is we gave the client a ticket naming convention. Not necessarily exactly Scrum, because you can have these sentences that are very long if you name a ticket like that. So we did a very, like, verb, noun, adjective type of thing, and it makes it super clear. And it was one of the most helpful. So it's not only do you make tickets, do you make quality tickets that are easy to read, and then part of our planning process is to rename them if we need to. And
Yep. Titles get changed all the time.
Yeah. It's the same thing like Drupal.org. Cool. The issue name, so it makes sense.
So that's a great segue to my next slide. We don't write user stories, which I built into my presenter notes, gasp, so that you can all be mortified with me. We do not write user stories for specifically that same reason. Wordsmithing gets in the way of trying to figure out what you're actually trying to say. So what we instead focus on is what business value does this provide? What are you hoping to accomplish in your own words? Because you're not technical, you're a client, and you want to just get the shiny thing, but you don't really know how to say it. And then what must actually be part of that? Like, what are you okay having be a phase 2? So including that kind of stuff as part of it just sort of helps get the intention out rather than the structure, not focusing on that. So now that we've talked about some touchy-feelies, we're going to talk about Jira, because that's our life. So what I want to do is just kind of knock through a couple things so you can see how we plan sprints, how we do things in Jira, because Jira is so customizable. You might have the thing that you use. Here's going to be what we use. So first of all, the name of the Austin dedicated Scrum team is Scrum and Coke. You can appreciate that. And we do sprint week, so we're on sprint 22 right now. It doesn't quite line up one-to-one with the actual calendar weeks, because we had a couple of weeks where we did maybe like a 1-week sprint to get certain things accomplished, so we're not one-to-one. But it does make it easier to just kind of keep track of which one you're on and which one's coming up. And then, so what we do is we kind of have this like on-based temporary sprint, and this just sort of helps kind of keep tickets in order. So tickets that live in this bucket are ones that I want to get into the next sprint. So maybe they didn't make it into the first sprint because there wasn't enough clarifying information, or because it just was too many story points to make it through, or just got added, but it's really important that it makes it to the next one. So that's kind of like the on-deck place that we put things. And it actually makes it really easy for when you start a new sprint, because when you close 22, this one will bump to the top, and you can just rename it to Scrum and Coke Sprint 23, and you don't have to move tickets, because in Jira moving tickets is annoying, at least for us. Cool, so another thing that we do as part of sprint planning, so I'm just going to kind of use this slide to talk about another thing. When we put together the sprint, One of the things that the team does, so it's not just me doing this, keep in mind, like it's not just me doing complete prioritization. The team will sit, and before we actually click start sprint, they'll go through it and they'll say, is there enough for me as the person like who does X, and Y, which I know teams are theoretically supposed to be all generalists. It's not real life. We have one designer, we have 3 developers, but some of the developers are better, more focused on the front end or on the back end, and so they all kind of go through and say, I can do this, and if you don't take this other ticket off, I'm going to die. Or if you don't add more tickets to what's already in here, I'm not going to have anything to do after Tuesday. So it's a really nice way of just kind of getting the conversation going, and also that people feel like they have a part of it, so it's not just them being told, here's tickets, they're prioritized, you must do this, and so it's a lot nicer and everyone feels happier as a result.
While we're on the screen, can I ask you what your quick filters are?
Yeah, so all of the quick filters, this is an actual screenshot of our Jira board with all the names changed to protect the innocent. So pink, blue, green, red, those are just client names.
Okay, client names.
Client names, yeah. So you'll see it on when we go to the next slide, one of the slides, kind of how we lay out the quick filters, because so that's a great thing. So one of the things that we did previously before Scrum was each of these clients actually had their own sprint board. They still do now because we want the client to go and look at their sprint board. But for a team to look and see what's all there to be looked at, it's so much easier to have them all live in one. So if we're trying to say, okay, we want to meet with client pink, we'll click on pink, only pink will show, and so it helps us really easily identify, does pink have anything in sprint 22?
I'm going to unpackage that because that's huge. Like, firstly, I found that your clients have access to your Scrum boards in Jira.
Yeah.
You're not using Service Desk, you're not using a Google Doc that's popular from
Nope.
Jira data like I've had to do in the past because stingy.
We want them in Jira.
Not enough users.
Yeah, the more active they want
So
to be,
you
the
want them in
happier they
Jira,
are.
and you give them access to their projects, and you give them access to move things, or just look.
We give them access to move things, but we talk about stuff the day before we actually estimate, and so they basically have like an 8-hour window to get in there and like mess things up. But what we also do is we use Confluence, and so all of the discussion that we have, we actually prioritize in Confluence, which they cannot edit. And so if they decide to go move things later, like I'm going off of what we talked about in the meeting that's documented.
And then you've re-sorted all these projects into this one dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do this for if you have like a big client that has multiple, if they're having a portfolio of work that's over time, if you're in a big company and you have lots of things going on,
Yeah.
you can use this model for the ongoing projects that you have in your portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a per client roll-up, it could be like departmental roll-ups and stuff. It's really handy for that.
Yeah, so we have clients that do have multiple things for us to work on, and depending on the size of it, like we'll try and fit it with that client, but if it starts to get complicated, we'll make them a new project, and we'll actually add them there as a new project. Yep. Cool, so the team self-assigns from the work. What you can see is that everybody on the actual sprint has been assigned. But we don't assign anything until the sprint has started, and we also don't assign all things. So we basically like do a best effort of like, this is probably mine, this is probably mine, and probably that one, and then there's maybe 6 at the bottom that don't have faces, and that's because we want the developers to be able to work through the tickets that they have assigned to them in the priority order, but then also pull tickets from to do, so that there's always someone, there's nobody sitting on their hands waiting to be told what to do, that they are empowered to actually go grab tickets on their own. And then the backlog, just really quick, I wanted to do a shout out to the backlog. This is where things go to die. And that's kind of why I have 3 buckets, is because it's a really nice way of saying to the client, like, hey, that really stupid thing that you requested, I'm making a ticket for it, and it will live in the backlog. Everyone feels like they're paid attention to. It's wonderful. So when we start a sprint, I just want to touch on this really quick. So we start a sprint. It's going to be the amount of story points we think we can deliver, but then a client's something breaks. So this is how we approach it. If it's really big, we'll talk to one of the developers who was on that project and might have more familiarity, just because that's how it sometimes is. If it's super big, they'll move to that fix. And then if it's super big, it might affect the delivery of some of the other tickets that are lower on the priority of to do. And so if that happens, we might need to have a conversation with the client whose tickets those belong to. If it's a small issue, we can say, hey, yeah, I'll put this in the backlog or the next sprint, but we do have a conversation with the client and say, do you want this to wait? Can it wait? Are you cool waiting? If you let it wait, I'll give you flowers. And so now a little bit out of Jira, just to go into the rituals a little bit. So one of the things that we do is the retrospective. And I don't know how this works for your team, but for our team, it was a little bit touch and go at first because it's a lot of share time. And if you're not in kind of a safe space for share time, it's really hard to actually bubble up things that are problematic. And so what we've actually been able to do was turn this into a very kind of cathartic, like this is your time to say things. If you're not saying things, then they're not upsetting you, and so they're not a problem. If they're upsetting you, you say them, and we talk about them, and we actually change things. And I think that whole talking about a thing and then delivering the thing that was the problem is actually going a long way to build trust with the team, and I think it's working really well because as a result of our retrospective, we've actually had some of our biggest and I think most effective changes happen in the team. So I didn't want to compare it to a stitch and bitch, even though it kind of is. I guess the difference for me is that everything that we're doing as a result of the retrospective is actionable. It's not just catharsis. So some of the things that came out of that, super cool picture here, is that treatment of tickets, specifically in testing. So we want to make sure that any ticket that's a 13-point ticket is in testing by that Thursday when we go to look at the sprint board, which gives us all day Friday, all day Monday, and potentially the weekend if it's a super big disaster to actually fix it before we go into demo. And so that way there's no big surprises also to the client of, yeah, that really big ticket we didn't get to. Sorry. So the other thing is that we had to teach the team to pick up tickets in testing because one of the things that changed is that previously Stephanie tested all the tickets, which was great because I liked that. But I didn't catch things that were in code or deployment instructions because I'm not a developer. And so we were missing some stuff there. And so what we started doing is saying, hey team, before Stephanie goes to test it, you test it. You make sure the functionality is working. You make sure the code is clean. And this way also, you can also see what's going on in the project on something that you're not actually building. And that helps immensely so that everyone knows what's actually happening. So we came up with this phrase of treat tickets and testing like a hot potato, don't let them sit. And so everyone kind of has this thing of as soon as they get in the morning, look at the test test column and grab something that does not have my face on it. Worked out pretty well. And again, testing is hugely important and it's something that we've all gotten really attuned to. So now we include code review, we do white box testing, we make sure to include deployment instructions. Another thing that we do is browser testing. So the team hates browser testing, and I like it, so I do that. And so we've gotten this into this rhythm of how to absorb the tickets. They're not necessarily problematic. It's just part of the thing that we do, and everyone kind of knows what to expect, and it's made tickets, I think, go a lot faster. We've also gotten a lot of really good discussion out of the ticket testing, things that I would never have thought to catch. Are getting bubbled up, and the things that we end up delivering are a lot nicer or a lot more functional than we had originally intended to do. So that's pretty cool. So now we're going to look at the sprint board, just to kind of go through how we have it set up, because again, this isn't necessarily how Scrum says to do it. I think they do 3 columns, but that's just not enough for us. So we have the to-do column, which is where all the tickets go into that are either sent back or have not been touched yet. Then we have the in progress, which is what someone's actually working on. And if you look, there's no duplicated faces because you cannot be working on 2 tickets at once unless you're coding with 2 hands on 2 different laptops. Don't do that. And then internal testing and review. This is where the team looks for the hot potato tickets. So the first ticket is actually a ticket that's assigned to someone in our Zurich office, which means they're testing it. And then there's also the ticket that's assigned to me, which means that someone on the team has already tested it and approved it and kicked it over to me. From there, tickets go into demo and client testing. So we have internal testing, and then we have kind of external review. So demo means typically that the client is either not hands-on and they're not going to really touch the product, or it means like it's a design we want to have them look at. Or client testing means that, let's say that the project is launched and they're doing an additional feature. This is where we would put the ticket for the client to go look at before we actually deploy it. Then from there, we can go in 2 different directions. If something's deployable, it goes into deploy. If it's not, it skips that column entirely and goes to done. We use the client testing and the demo column kind of as our end point for when we do the end of sprint, because we keep all the tickets in there and then we assign the team faces to who's going to actually demo that item when we go into client demos on Tuesday. So it's really helpful to us to kind of have this A, B, C, D, and done is kind of demo. And then when the sprint is over, we move things that have actually been discussed and demoed to the client into the done column.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So these columns can be configured to have multiple workflow states. In each column. Do you keep the simplicity of just in progress as in progress, or do you have multiple workflow states that are within the in progress umbrella?
I think for us, in progress is just mean that someone's actually touching it. I don't think we have anything more complex than that. I know that the Zurich team uses in progress as where the default this needs more work goes, but for us it's harder to track that than just putting it back into the to-do and putting the ticket back at the top. So like if a ticket is in testing and something's wrong with it, instead of putting it into in progress where it can kind of get lost and stuff, it goes to the top of the to-do column and typically gets assigned to the person who originally worked on it.
I think that's really nice because it gets rid of that definition of done. It's like, but I haven't worked on it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's like, for some of ours, we have just additional like states that are in progress. What level of in progress are you? And it sounds a little nitty, but it's not, because we needed to have a little bit more clarification. It's like in progress, waiting for the business or something like that. So I've started it, and we've also has like a what next and a column and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it gets confusing, but it is helpful because then we can service to the client like, dude, it's waiting for you. You can't. It's not doing anything because it's waiting on client, and it helps surface.
Yeah, and I think for us, we use the daily stand-up for that. So like if something is stuck, then we bubble it that way. So that way, like it can get action on really quickly. Yeah. What?
We're just 2 minutes over.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through these really quick. If you can stick around. Yeah, real quick.
Can I ask you a question? You said you had your clients had access to your ticketing system.
Yeah.
So if they put in a ticket, it will go automatically to do, or you
It'll go into the backlog. Yeah.
And you approve it, and, okay. And
Yeah.
you use another column to say expedite for stuff like this.
So what we do regarding communication is we have them talk to us immediately. Like if there's something on fire, you do not make a ticket, you come to me. Because things get lost and email is the worst. Yeah. Real quick, I'll just blow through some of these. Communication change is part of this. So when we moved to Scrum, we actually moved off email. We moved everything into Slack, and open communication is part of the channels, which has been really nice. So we have all kinds of things. We have a project dedicated for each channel, a deployment channel, and cats. I'll knock through this one really quickly. Another thing we got really good at as part of our retrospective is actually filling in comments so that people can like see what happened, why decisions were made, and then if we ever meet to talk through something, we actually document that as a comment, not as part of the AC, so that we can see that things were added to it. I know there's history, but the history is just not as like clear as if you just see it like laid out like this. Another thing that we did is we started having meetings that don't suck. So it's not just me calling meetings now, it's that whole self-organizing thing of if the team has a question, the team can either come to me, go to the client, talk to themselves, figure out something, and that way you're not waiting for someone to tell you kind of what the next step is. Our remote collaboration also changed. For the first 3 months of this year, we worked remotely, which means no pants. But our team is also distributed. We've got Cape Town and Zurich, and so we have to be really good about clarifying things that are easier when you're in person, getting better at that when you're not. And one of those things is when you're on a video call with someone, you must use your video. So, a little post-it thing. Another thing that we really stress is that if you have something to talk through and it's important or it needs a lot of clarification, don't use email, call them. Same thing goes with the team. If there's a thing that needs to be talked out, get on Skype, get on the phone. Nobody likes the phone, I know, but call them and things get resolved a lot easier. So now we're in the client vein. Really quickly, our proposals also changed as a result of Scrum. We originally tried to take out estimations, and that sucked, so we put them back. But now we have it in writing of how it works. So this is an estimation. It's an estimation. The cost is not guaranteed, but what it basically does is say, here's the things that you want to get accomplished, here's what we're kind of expecting it to be, don't be sad if it's not. But it gives us a baseline for when we're dealing with a budget to reach, of kind of figuring out what that number is going to be. And then we reinforce, we do Scrum. Let's talk about Scrum. Here's how Scrum works. Here's how changes affect your budget. Here's how they affect your timeline. And then if they really want to do like a deep dive, we offer them like an actual intensive thing. But this way, it's not a huge surprise when they show up and Scrum is happening. And then who pays for Scrum? Everybody does. It's a really quick thing. It's not going to make any sense, but basically what we do is we take story points and use them as a percentage of the sprint against all hours that are logged to the project that is work loggers for the retrospective, the plannings, and things like that. And then we take out anything that's internal and we apply all the rest to the clients and we put it in a line item as strategy and planning so that it's visible what we're doing so that people know that Scrum is happening. And we've actually done some estimations on it, some number crunching on it, and the amount that we spend on Scrum is about what we used to spend on project management, and so they're not necessarily paying more, they're just paying in a different bucket. It's kind of nice. So major takeaways is that we've gotten a lot more efficient. Really quick plug for Amazee.io. It makes spinning up a dev site for all of our shared projects take like 2 hours, which makes it so much quicker to actually pass projects. We've gotten better at communication. We've gotten better at expectations. The team is happier. The team has more confidence because they're in front of the client, because they're getting used to looking good, presenting things that work, which is really nice. And the team is invested in the final product. I feel like our team has gotten better at being a team by going through all of these processes. So finally, we are now all Scrum, super great. We're able to pass tickets on projects. We're able to discuss things across the different teams and have kind of a shared understanding of how everything is working or expected to work, or how tickets should get delivered, and that's making everyone a lot happier. So in conclusion, live happily ever after, and it worked for us. Thank you for coming. Sorry I went over. Are there any questions that we might get kicked out so we can ask the questions in the hallway?
Do you have the slides available on that?
Yeah, I'm going to post the slides.
On the Badcamp?
Yeah, on the back.
Cool. Thank you very much.
When you do summations, do you take in consideration